If you have a weak urinary stream, anytime during the day or night, you're in the right place. I'm going to talk about exactly what's behind this and give you practical things that are fairly easy to do to correct it. Most people are told that this weak urinary stream is a prostate problem. If you're female, you've been told it's your aging or from childbirth, and you're just going to have to live with it. Not true. A weak urinary stream is usually not the prostate. It's usually related to several other things, okay? And the body gives us clues on what is causing it. But I want to emphasize, most of the time, it's not some type of plumbing problem where there's some obstruction. There's something else going on. Here's the first clue. You get up in the morning and you urinate and it's weak. But then you drink coffee and it gets stronger. What does that tell you? It tells us right off the bat, it's not a prostate problem. It's more of a problem in the nervous system, specifically in your bladder, because the bladder is a smooth muscle that contracts, and coffee tends to help relax that whole apparatus. So if the coffee improves your urination, we know the problem is in your autonomic nervous system. I'm going to touch on exactly what that means in a little bit and what to do about it. The next problem with a weak urinary stream has to do with a little muscle called the detrusor muscle, which is not really under your voluntary control. It's something just happens, you don't have to think about it. It works when you're going to the bathroom because it creates this smooth muscle contraction. And then if you sneeze while you're urinating, it'll completely stop contracting and you'll stop urinating. So it's not controlled by the voluntary muscle action, okay? It's involuntary. And it's a muscle that is highly dependent on energy, specifically ATP. And so if you have an energy problem, let's say you're fatigued, this muscle is going to start becoming weak, and that's going to affect the stream. If you have a weak stream and you also have a lot of fatigue, suspect a problem with this muscle right here. This muscle could also be affected by years of just too much sitting, as well as insulin resistance, okay? This occurs by consuming too many carbs and snacking too much and just kind of grazing a lot. You're going to create a problem with this muscle and you'll eventually get tired, and then it affects your urinary stream. Then we get to another root cause of a weak stream, and this is a problem within the autonomic nervous system. There's two parts of that system. You have one part that's the flight or fight, and then you have the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. And your complete urination system is controlled by the parasympathetic. So if you are in stress mode all the time, you're stuck in what's called the sympathetic nervous system. This means that this system tends to turn off, and you're going to have bladder issues. And not just bladder issues, you might have anxiety, you might have poor sleep. The good news is the solution to a lot of these issues is the same. Now, the next issue with the bladder is, let's say there's certain times of the day, let's say afternoon, that you have a very good, strong flow of urine, right? But at night or during the night or in the early morning, it's very, very weak. And it really has nothing to do with the coffee. This is something a little different where your urine kind of goes on this cycle where it gets better and then worse. That has a lot to do with the circadian rhythm of the body. And chances are your sleep is not that great either, because the circadian rhythm affects sleep, it affects hormones, it affects urine, it affects metabolism. And so if you have that problem, it's actually a very easy fix. I'm going to show you how to fix that. But just to back up some of these things I talked about, the common medication they use for improving urination flow is bethanyl. What's really interesting about this is so many men are told that, oh, you have a prostate problem, and they put you on this medication. But this medication does not work on the prostate. It doesn't address the prostate at all. It doesn't shrink the prostate. It doesn't affect the prostate. It primarily affects this autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, especially this parasympathetic, runs on a very specific neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And one of the best remedies is vitamin B1, natural B1. And B1 can actually give you a natural drug effect on the autonomic nervous system. So when you think about B1, Think about it increasing acetylcholine and improving the nervous system. And what's really interesting about that is that vitamin B1 also is key in improving your energy. Vitamin B1 is really important in the nerve-muscle connection. Vitamin B1 becomes deficient when you consume a lot of high carbohydrate foods, when you drink alcohol. If you have insulin resistance or you're a diabetic, you're always going to be deficient in B1. If you go through a lot of stress, you're going to need B1. So B1 is one of the best natural remedies to address a weak urine stream. Not just addressing this root cause, but also the muscle that controls the bladder and also the elimination of urine. And so if you look at what the medical profession is doing, they're treating this way downstream, okay? They're trying to manage the symptom, but they're not looking at the acetylcholine, the autonomic nervous system, because this is more corrective. A diabetic has a lot of problems with their autonomic nervous system. Digestion, for example, the ability to eliminate and get rid of waste. B1 is the antidote to that as well. So B1 is super important, but you also at the same time want to correct the reason why you're B1 deficient in the first place. And that would be going on a low-carb diet, cutting down on the alcohol, doing intermittent fasting so you're not eating between the meals or grazing, especially at night. That corrects insulin resistance. Oh, and by the way, one of the best things for stress is B1. So it's going to help you cope with stress. When I was in practice, I would have people come in, husband and wife, fighting. I'd put them in separate rooms. I would then give them vitamin B1, wait about 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, come back, and I would find they're in communication, they're talking, they're feeling relaxed. Because one of the biggest symptoms mentally from a B1 deficiency is nervous tension and stress. So by taking B1, you can actually make a dent in a lot of different problems related to the autonomic nervous system. Now, I do want to add one little point about women. If they go through menopause and they start having a weak stream, this could be related to estrogen. What's happening deep inside is estrogen greatly influences something called nitric oxide. And that has to do with the vasodilation of the blood flow that goes to the nervous system around the bladder. And the two most powerful things to help fix this or improve nitric oxide in the bladder are getting more exposure to sun and also doing more exercise. And what's really cool about this antidote, we'll call it an antidote, is this right here. Okay, I didn't talk about this yet. But if your weak stream gets better and worse in certain parts of the day, then we know we have a problem with the circadian rhythm. And the antidote or the fix for that is to correct the lighting. Your lighting controls the circadian rhythm. I'm talking about the contrast between at night being dark and during the morning or during the day being bright. Our DNA in biology responds very well to a lot of bright light, okay, during the day, in the morning, exposure to the sun. Most people do not get even close to the amount of light exposure that they really need. And then at night, when it starts to get dark, they turn the lights on and it's very, very bright to the time they go to bed. And so the real root problem that screws up the circadian rhythm is there's no contrast. There's not a great difference. It's kind of like always kind of gray. The darkness is super important in the evening, about 2 or 3 hours before bed. You need to turn the lights down. You don't want to be exposed to blue light. And in the morning, you need to go outside and expose yourself to sun for about at least a half hour to hopefully an hour. And even during the day, to be outside. You don't have to look up into the sun, but you will need to be out in the sun. Super important. You're going to start seeing improvement in your hormones, your mood, just by fixing the light cycle in your life. In the wintertime, it's really hard to go outside because it's too cold. So you need to get a very bright light. And they have different lights that you can get that kind of mimic a full spectrum sun, and you put them close to your computer and you just turn it on in the morning time if you're by your computer, so you get exposed to this bright light in the morning or during the day.